Hello all, welcome to VG Emporium. Today there is a special event. Well, actually it is the whole month of June that's the special event. And what is that? It is the Masters of VGM. This is a multi-VGM podcast event, so it's not just me, it's almost everyone that runs a podcast that focuses on video game music. Though I personally feel that the criteria that, for people's composer choices isn't as strict as the title Masters of VGM would, entail. How I'm going to interpret it, I'm still not quite sure. I'm just sharing more composers that, I personally enjoy and feel, might need a little more attention. And how my format's actually going to work is that I'm going to be playing 3 tracks per composer. I'm going to start off with, one of their earlier tracks, talk about their history, play one of, their tracks that they kind of made throughout the middle of their career, or in the case of 2 of my composers, I'm going to be playing some of their original music that is actually video game music adjacent. Talk a bit about more of the composer, some interesting facts, influences, whatnot, things I can find. And then finish off with one of their more recent compositions. So it's going to be a lot of music, and maybe not so much talking from me this time around, more letting the music speak for the composers themselves. So without further ado, let's get into this. The first track I played for you is called Aubenwelt from Saga Frontier 2 on the PS1. And it's by my first featured composer, Masashi Hamauzu. And the reason I start off with this track is because, it's the one that you hear the most in Saga Frontier 2, being kind of like the map theme, in a way. And I feel it encapsulates his influences. So, composer Hiroshi Miyagawa, for his sweeping anime compositions. Ryuichi Sakamoto and his work in the Yellow Magic Orchestra and his own individual works as a synth and electronic musician. And then his pianistic influences from Claude Debussy and Maurice Ravel. And, I really feel that Saga Frontier 2 is his exploration of, kind of combining these 4 influences and creating his own, individual style. Now, let me give you some background. He was born to a pianist mother and an operatic singer father in Germany and was raised there up until his late teens. So, shortly after he graduated high school, the family moved back to Osaka, Japan, and he attended the Tokyo National University of Fine Arts and Music. And it was there that he began listening to the musics of Miyagawa and Sakamoto, and gained an appreciation for the classical pianists Debussy and Ravel. Once graduated from university, he was going to look into becoming a classical composer, but then it struck him that he wanted to actually compose music for video games. So thus, he got his job at Square, and his first project being Front Mission Gun Hazard in 1996 alongside Nobuo Uematsu, Yasunori Matsuda, and Junya Nakano. But he only contributed about 4 songs for the whole soundtrack. He would go on to contribute a few tracks for Tobal No. 1 along with a bunch of other composers. And then his first solo project being Chocobo Dungeon, but that was mostly rearranging some of Nobuo Uematsu's previous compositions with a few of his own originals. And then we get to Saga Frontier 2, which is his first actual just full-on solo project where he didn't have to worry about rearranging anybody else's work, as well as working for the first time with sound programmer Ryo Yamazaki. And he's the reason why the instruments in Saga Frontier 2 sound so good, especially for a PS1 game. He would then go on to collaborate with Uematsu and Nakano on Final Fantasy X, and then would do Unlimited Saga, Masashi Samurai Legend, Dirge Cerberus, Final Fantasy VII. I forgot to mention that in 2004, he took over the position of lead composer at Square Enix, but would step down from that position about 2010, shortly after finishing Final Fantasy XIII. So right now would be a good time for me to play something for you from Final Fantasy XIII, seeing as it kind of fits in with my my idea for how I'm going to present the music for these composers. But a good old switcheroo right here. I'm going to be playing something for you from Unlimited Saga, and that's going to be Battle Theme EX. That was Battle Theme EX from Unlimited Saga, composed by Masashi Hamauzu. And yes, I originally had something slotted from Final Fantasy XIII to play for you, The Hanging Edge. You know, and it's a pretty good song, don't get me wrong, but I just honestly prefer the music from Unlimited Saga, especially the battle music. And I'm gonna state it right here, I'm not really much of an orchestral guy. You know, don't get me wrong, he writes beautiful, amazing, orchestral compositions, laced with his impressionistic influences. But my favorite music of his is the, really experimental stuff, as well as his solo piano pieces and his more sparser, kind of disharmonic music. I don't know how to really put it. And so yeah, this track, it's like this fusion of all these different things, like tango, gypsy jazz, backed by those big beats and that gunky synth bass. And yeah, all the battle themes for this game are just all over the place. So yeah, the reason why I decided to play something from Unlimited Saga over Final Fantasy XIII is just that I enjoy Unlimited Saga's OST a lot more. He was just able to let loose and experiment with all these different sounds and genres and everything, whereas Final Fantasy XIII, it was a Final Fantasy game. He had to play it straight. And no doubt that it is like a beautiful soundtrack. Maybe I just need to give it another chance. Who knows? And it's kind of funny, I'm kind of choosing one controversial, much maligned game over another controversial, much maligned game. All this to say that I believe Masashi Hamauzu is at his best when he's just experimenting, just going all out on just experimenting with genres and sounds and just samples and instruments and synths and everything. Is just, yeah. So now to continue on with what he has composed for, he went on to do Final Fantasy XIII 2, Lightning Returns Final Fantasy XIII. He actually composed music for an anime called Paulette's Chair, did some arrangements for Super Smash Bros. For Nintendo 3DS and Wii U, Groove Coaster, the composed shooting star on that one, Legend of Legacy, Typhoon Naruto, which is another anime, Classicaloid, another anime, World of Final Fantasy, The Alliance Alive, composed A Dream in Flight from Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers, and then composed and arranged music for Final Fantasy VII Remake alongside Nobuo Uematsu and many others. So now I'm actually going to play you a song from Final Fantasy VII Remake. No switcheroos here. This is Target Mako Reactor 5, composed by Masashi Hamauzu. That was Target Mako Reactor 5 from Final Fantasy VII Remake, composed by Masashi Hamauzu. And boy howdy do I want to play this game, but alas, I do not have a PS4 or a PC powerful enough to run it when or if it ever comes out for PC. And so now this song is another one of the types that I really enjoy from Masashi Hamauzu. It's just like these kind of more moodier, kind of sparser kind of songs, like, slightly discordant, dissonant. This actually sounds like more of a serious take on the track Sneaky Keishi from Dirge Cerberus Final Fantasy VII. I mean, if you want a fun listen, go check that one out. So now here's a little fun fact regarding Final Fantasy VII, the original. He actually was the synthesizer programmer for the rendition of Josen Heide's The Creation, as well as providing bass vocals for the 8-person chorus of One Winged Angel, putting to good use what his opera singer of a papa taught him. Another cool thing is that he has done a lot of piano arrangements for Square as well, and these would include Piano Collection SF2, Rhapsody on a Theme of Saga Frontier 2, which is actually one of my favorites, but, I'm a sucker for Saga Frontier 2. Piano Collection Final Fantasy X, Piano Collections Final Fantasy 13, and he's also done his own original slash arrangements collection called Violin Donc, in which the first half is made up of original piano compositions, and then the second half is like piano arrangements of songs from all the games between Saga Frontier 2 and Final Fantasy VII Dirge Cerberus. And he has a music group called Imeurat, formed alongside vocalist Mina around 2010-2011. And I gotta say, they're making some pretty awesome stuff. What with his compositions and his abilities as a pianist, and Mina with her vocal stylings and knowledge of her musical heritage through her Ainu ancestry, which the name Imeurat is Ainu for Flash of Light. So before I close out this section, I just kind of like to say why I chose Masashi Hamauzu as one of my composers. And that's due to the fact that he's the one that made me realize that there's actually names behind the video game music that I loved. And Saga Frontier 2, as strange and unfinished game as it is, holds a soft place in my heart due to the fact that it was one of my first PlayStation 1 games alongside Mega Man 8. And the music in it some reason just grabbed me. I don't know why. So when I was finally able to, I went to go look for it, and I found the name Masashi Hamauzu linked to it, and I was like, whoa, this guy made the music for this game that I like? I'm going to go see if he has more. Thus being part of the beginning of the journey that I went on to this point right now, where I'm blabbing to you about video game music and their composers. Cool thing, huh? One last little thing, growing up, I remember seeing, on my mom's piano, music books for Debussy and Ravel, but it wasn't until, finding out that he gained inspiration from these two that I decided to actually seriously look into their music and gain a new appreciation for them. So now, we're going to move on to my next composer, and that is Keishi Yonao. And we're going to start off with round 2 from Mad Stalker on the Sharp X68K. That was round 2 from Mad Stalker Full Metal Force, composed by Keishi Yonao. And I just couldn't help but not have one of the Masters of FM on this show about composers of the Masters of the VGM variety. He's actually pretty well known, at least in the, certain circles, for his technical mastery of, like, the FM synthesis. And I'm not going to argue with that. I mean, I really love his FM music. And I did go on to talk about him at length on episode 8, the FM Funk Trilogy. But that's not going to stop me from talking about him some more. So unlike our previous composer, who had grown up with a musical family and had a very young interest in music, Keishi, he's totally self-taught, just went into it without any musical background. Just starting out with a Sharp X1 Turbo 2 and the FM sound source in there. And in using the bundled program VIP, he would take band scores and just kind of figure everything out little by little, like, how to write music, as well as learning how to program FM. So a few years after this, he had a friend working at a company called Hertz as a programmer, and he suggested to him, hey, you should put a demo tape in to him, show him what the stuff that you made. And he, of course, got the job and did his first project, Hidafos, on the MSX2, and he did it all in MML. That's Music Macro Language. And he did 2 versions, the PSG3 and then the FM pack. And through doing this, he gained much more programming skills to that when he went on to work on music for the Sharp X68000, which had the YM2151 sound chip, which he had already worked with in his college years. But with the added bonus of having an 80 PCM channel, he would create an absolute banger of a soundtrack for the game Neural Gear. He would then go on to work on the music for Ruin, Kami no Isan, Mad Stalker Full Metal Force, where he actually started using his trademark coarse/delayed bass sound, which I love oh so much, and only recently, within the last year, figured out how to do myself in Deflamask. He would eventually come to do Asuka 100%, Maxima Burning Fest, which he is most well known for, and then onto Kain Seibo, the Virgin on Megiddo, and then would only do sound design on Strania, the Stella Machina. So now that I made it halfway through his list of compositions, I'm going to play for you his next track. And he is actually one of the 2 composers who I'm going to be playing a original track of that is video game music adjacent. This is Plus Pulse, made using the Korg AQ DS10 Plus on the DSi.
That was Plus Pulse, programmed and performed by Keishi Yonao, using Korg AQ DS10 Plus on the DSi. And how do I mean performed? Well, he's using the stylus on the second screen to do a lot of modulations and pattern activations and all kinds of fun stuff. Oh, and before I go on any further, I'd like to note that I am currently now in my new workspace. It's a closet that used to contain a bunch of boxes all the way up to the ceiling and is now totally cleared out, and I'm kind of using it, and I'm still figuring out how to deaden the weird reverb that's kind of going on right now. So forgive me for the weird sound that's kind of like around my voice right now. So I feel like, this song kind of just goes to show just how crazy technically talented this guy is to be able to make something like this on a DS, no less. And I think I've actually seen a video of where he's actually using this at a live performance, which he has done quite a few of. And he's actually also made a lot of albums of like just original music as well, using a lot of like FM stuff. He was actually been a mainstay contributor on like that Sound Shock FM Funk trilogy that I had showcased on episode 8. And this kind of is a lot of what he was doing between 2011 and 2016, which in 2016 he actually did the ending theme for Galgun Double Piece, and then going on did a music composition and rearrangements on Yuno, A Girl Who Chants Love at the Beyond of This, and did arrangements on Azure Striker Gunvolt 2, wanted to do sound effects for Tent to Shooter, did arrangements again on Gunvolt Chronicles, Luminous Avenger IX, and most recently in 2022 was the sound effect designer for Phantom Breaker Omnia. And though he may not be as prominent as Yuzo Koshiro in like the VGM music scene, it's because a lot of his music wasn't available in the West, because the games that he made music for, a lot of them are like visual novels or just made for Japanese PCs. And only a few of them were ever ported over to the West, like Mad Stalker on the PS1 or Sega Saturn, but that having that more sample-based sound as opposed to the FM soundtrack. Which brings us to the last song that I have for this composer's round. And it's going to be from Yuno, the 2017 Switch port, and I believe it is called Meiso Kyu, or Stray Palace. That was Meiso Kyu, or Stray Palace. And I had to Google translate it because it was all in kanji or hiragana, so it may not be the exact title, but it's what I'm going with. And so what I gotta say about this track is, hooey, damn! That is some funky slapping bass right there. And I actually forgot to mention it about Mad Stalker is that his bass lines were really inspired by like Galaxy Force 2. If you haven't heard that soundtrack, go listen to that. That is some Sega madness. But I can definitely hear it in this. Just that crazy bass line is really reminiscent of Galaxy Force. So now this track is an original composition for the Yonao remake on the Switch, which, if you haven't listened to it yet, go listen to the original soundtrack of this game from the PC 98. It is just amazing. It's like up there with Ground Seed and oh geez, if you haven't listened to this, you haven't listened to that, but you should go listen to both of them, because they're both just masterpieces by Ryo Takami and Ryo Umimoto. Though Umimoto passed away in 2011, which is very unfortunate, but Ryo Takami came back and actually, arranged and composed on the remake as well, seeing as he was one of the original composers. But we're here to talk about Keishi, which unfortunately I don't have much more I have to say about him, other than maybe that he, basically blew my mind about a little more than 10 years ago when I first heard his music, because as I mentioned earlier, I was absolutely fascinated with that coarse bass sound that he had done in Mad Stalker and Suka 120%. And then all his original music outside of video games is just really awesome stuff. A good start would be to check out his album series Cyberphonics. So now we're moving on to our next composer, who is not only part of one, but two incredible sound teams. And her name? Aki Hata. And we're going to be starting her section off with Aqueduct from Lagrange Point. You just listened to Aqueduct from Lagrange Point, composed by Aki Hata. And though this soundtrack is famously known to be mostly composed by Akio Dabashi and Noriyuki Takahashi of Rebecca, Aki Hata contributed some tracks to this, being her first project with Konami. And as far as I can tell, the very first video game that she ever composed for. And as you could probably tell by this song, she had already had a pretty damn good grasp on musical composition, most definitely of the pop variety. So I can only imagine that before she joined Konami that she had, some experience being in bands and writing pop music. And so as I said earlier, she has her own distinctive style here already. And as with any composer, just with each project she did, she just got better and better. And I personally believe that some of her best stuff is on the Sega Mega Drive / Genesis. And again, that's probably my FM junkie talking here. So now let me tell you what she has done. She started with Lagrange Point, would go on to work on Contra 3 The Alien Wars would be uncredited. She would then go on to work on Mouryo Senki Madara 2, and then in 1993 would finally get to working on the Sega Genesis Mega Drive with Rocket Knight Adventures, and then her first solo project being Ranma Half, Kakugeki Mandao on the Game Boy, and then her final project with Konami being Contra Hard Corp before moving on with that group of folks that left Konami to form Treasure to go work on McDonald's Treasureland Adventure, which is a damn crazy soundtrack for a McDonald's game. She would then do her first solo Mega Drive soundtrack with Bishoujo Senshi Sailor Moon, which is actually the first game I listened to that I became aware of her name and her music, though I unknowingly had got introduced to her through Lagrange Point a few years prior. Would then do Ketsuba, Yosuo Keiba, Kizoku EX94 and 95, and between those would be part of the teams that would do Dynamite Heady and Yu Yu Hakusho Makio Toitsusen. Which I've said it before, and I'm gonna say it again. I believe that is Treasure's best Mega Drive soundtrack. She would then be the main of 2 composers to work on Light Crusader, which was the last Sega Mega Drive and Genesis game produced by Treasure, which is actually the game I'm going to be playing her next track from. This is the theme of Dungeon 1 and 6 from Light Crusader. You just heard Dungeons 1 and 6 from Light Crusader, composed by Aki Hata. And she's kind of all over the place with this one. It goes from being kind of like a wary, creepy kind of dungeon theme, all the way into like this crazy pop rock RPG battle theme, which actually works because this is an isometric dungeon crawler action adventure game, like think Stalker if you're familiar with that game. So now, shortly after working on this game's OST, her involvement with video game music would kind of start to taper. So, shortly following Light Crusader, she did one track, PNKN, for Soul Blade or Soul Edge on the PS1. Then in '99 would do Bakuretsu Muteki Bangayo on the N64, as well as Bangayo on the Dreamcast. In 2002 would contribute music to Magi Death Fight Maho Gakuen on the Xbox. And then the last action-oriented game that she would actually contribute to would be Choaniki Seinaru Protein Densetsu, or The Legend of the Holy Protein. So now a weird little side tangent. You may be wondering why a game would be called Legend of the Holy Protein. Well, if you're not familiar with the name Choaniki, it's basically a shoot-'em-up game where you play as very buff men in Speedos spinning around in the sky shooting bullets out of their heads. Think Sexy Parodius, but everything is basically just muscular men. And there's your little nugget of joy for the day. So after this, she would go on to write lyrics for the games Suzimiya Haruhi no Gekido and Suzimiya Haruhi no Heiretsu, which are both rhythm games based off the melancholy of Haruhi. And then in 2012 would be the lyricist for 3 Idolmaster games, the Idolmaster Shiny Festa Funky Note, Shiny Festa Groovy Tone, and Shiny Festa Honey Sound, all on the Wii. And the last game credit I could find for her was for Stella Glow on the 3DS. She wrote the lyrics for the main theme, Hikari no Metamorphosis. So now is the point where I'm going to play you her last track. I could pull something from, either Bangayo, Choaniki, or even like the PNKN track. I checked stuff out for the Haruhi and the Idolmasters games, and I'm not going to subject you to that. No moe on this show, no siree. So the only options that are left are her Mega Drive stuff, and that's okay. So I'm going to play for you one of my favorite of her Mega Drive compositions, and this is Staff Roll from Bishoujo Senshi Sailor Moon. So you just heard Staff Roll from Bishoujo Senshi Sailor Moon, composed by Aki Hata. So now a little story. Back in 2011, I had gotten my first iPhone, and one of the first apps I got was this program called Modizer, which was like, started out as a program to be able to listen to mod files or tracker files, and then the guy who was working on it, YoYoFR, started adding like different formats, so like eventually the VGM formats. So one of the first VGMs that I downloaded was from this game, Bishoujo Senshi Sailor Moon, and I listened to this OST a lot because I just enjoyed it. I mean, it's all the music in it is really good, like the compositions are just really enjoyable, and it's basically the reason why I featured her as one of my Masters of VGM, because I just really love her Mega Drive compositions. Now a little bit more on her before we move on to my last composer. So I had said earlier that her video game music compositions had started to taper, but that was mostly for like the action-oriented games. Because starting in 1996, she would go on to write music for many visual novels, and then like in the later years would be like the main lyricist writing like for the openings and all. And she would be doing the same thing for a lot of animes, just writing the opening themes, like the lyrics. And in that time, she would have her own pop music career, having like 5 albums between 99 and 2014, and then a lot of singles between 2000 and 2016, and then being a member of the band Tsukihiko, providing vocals and keyboard. And as of current, she's a member of the band Q Megahertz, and she has also recently released a solo album, Kaikote Volume 6, The Kingdom in Your Eyes, which is a collection of arrangements of video game music that she has composed in the past and original songs. So now we're to my last composer, and this time, it's a Westerner. So let's get ourselves to Hamamatsucho, catch the monorail to Haneda Airport, and catch a plane over to the US. Because we're gonna go hang out with Virt, or as most everybody knows him now, Jake Kaufman. And we're gonna start off with Billy's Theme from Drymouth, a homebrew game on the Game Boy Color. That funky DMG jam you just heard was Billy's Theme from Drymouth, composed by Jake Kaufman. And he has truly earned the title of Master of VGM with all the work he's done in these last 22 years. Now let's start from the beginning. The man's a high school dropout, due to what he says was a total lack of work ethic and no concept of timeliness or organization. So what's a guy to do with all the free time not having to go to school? Well, he decides to use that to start doing arrangements and remixes of video game music under the name Virt. And he would do this for a few years, as well as doing some original compositions, until 2000 when he actually got his first gig as a video game music composer, which would be for Qbert on the Game Boy. And Jeezy Weezers, if you hadn't listened to it, go check it out, it's amazing. He's pulling sounds and styles out of the DMG that hadn't been heard in commercial Game Boy games, and he would just continue improving. He worked on the music for this game, Drymouth, which is actually a homebrew game, which was never officially published as far as I can tell, and what it is basically a Picross game. But it did get a lot of notice because it was extremely polished for just being a homebrew game between, from the graphics to the gameplay and of course the music, which Jake just goes all over the place with. So from this time to 2002, he would work on a lot of licensed games such as Eminem Mini Madness, David Beckham Soccer, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Would get his break into working on the Game Boy Advance with the game X-Blade Inline Skater, which I think I actually had back in the day. Would continue work on the Game Boy Advance with Carnage Rally, do music for Godzilla Dominator on the Xbox, and then of course we come up to Shantae, and this was a game that pushed the Game Boy Color to its limits, just with the amount of detail, the animations, and of course the music. And then from 2002 to about 2010, he worked on a lot more licensed titles, as well as some original games, which are the ones I'm going to tell you about. Those would be Hardcore Pinball, Legend of K, Rebel Star Tactical Command, Juka and the Monophonic Menace, Scourge, Hive. But of note in 2007, he did the music for Contra 4, which he actually reused his song Red Falcon, which was a remix of like the entirety of the Contra soundtrack that he did on Scream Tracker 3 and just made it the whole first stage sound, track. And then he also worked on TMNT on the DS as well. And working on these were for him a dream come true. Because if you're familiar with his music, you could tell he's very much heavily inspired by a lot of Konami's titles on the NES. Now let's see, 2008, 2009, mostly like licensed titles, and then finally in 2010, he came back to work with WayForward to do the soundtrack for Shantae, Risky's Revenge, which I will tell you right now is pretty damn good. And in this time, you know, the 10-year span, he worked on a lot of his own original music, remixes, using mostly trackers, which is actually how I found him through his weird remix rearrangement of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles entire soundtrack from the original NES game. And that led me to his website, Big Lion Music, which is no longer up. I haven't been able to find it. But on there was a lot of his just original music, remixes, covers, like, you know, showing like also the games that he had worked on. And so what I'm going to play for you right now is one of those original songs that he had worked on that is one of my favorites. This is Staring at My Spaceship, DX Edition. Welcome back. That was Staring at My Spaceship, DX Edition, by Jake Kaufman. Now, I don't know the exact year when this was made, but according to the MP3 file that I'm playing for you right now, it was originally modified or, downloaded back in 2009, which is pretty damn crazy to think about. But yes, while he was working on video game music, he was creating epics like this, so, no wonder that he's such, a amazing composer. And actually, if you want to listen to this, back in 2013 on his Bandcamp, he released a album called Choice Nuggets, which is a collection of all his older musics from probably 2000 all the way up to that point 2013. So now continuing on with the games that he's composed for, we're just going to talk about some big ones. So in 2011, he did Mighty Switch Force. 2012, Darkstalker's Revenge and Double Dragon Neon. In 2013, Mighty Switch Force 2 and DuckTales Remastered. And then in 2014, the big one, Shovel Knight. And he had some help from Manami Matsume on this, who had done the original soundtrack for Mega Man, so this is definitely another dream come true. And in that same year, he did Shantae and the Pirate's Curse. 2015, Mighty Switch Force, Hose It Down, and Legend of K Anniversary. And then in 2016, worked on Shantae, Half Genie Hero. So now between this time and 2020, there isn't really anything new from him because he's working on the soundtracks for the DLCs for Shovel Knight as well as Shovel Knight Dig. Though in 2020, he did contribute to a couple games, Vitamin Connection and Raise the Dead. But in 2021, more Shovel Knight in the form of Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon, which this last song we're going to go out on is from, and it is called Worn Down. That was Worn Down from Shovel Knight Pocket Dungeon, composed by Jake Kaufman. And I just love for this track that he went for kind of like a cool jazz and bass sound, which is why I decided to go with this one. But I did give the rest of the OST a listen, and it's a really awesome combination of just like drum and bass, breakbeat, really chilled out electronic music, some kind of callbacks to like his Game Boy Advance music. I would suggest you go give it a listen. Now, how to describe this game? Strategic falling block puzzler. Strategic how, you may ask? Well, with every move or action you take, blocks shall fall, one square at a time. Now, unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to play this game, so I'm only going off what I've seen on the trailer and what I've read about it. So now, where to next for the mad musician Kaufman? Well, he's currently working on the soundtrack for the game Mina the Hollower, being developed by WayForward, and where he created the music for Shovel Knight using FamiTracker and the VRC6 expansion. For Mina, he's going to be using another Konami sound expansion, this time from the MSX, called the Konami SCC. Gonna be some wavetable madness, folks! And whereas he had Manami Masume guest compose on Shovel Knight, he's gonna actually have Yuzo Shiro guest compose on Mina the Hollower. Pretty damn cool. And there you go, folks. Jake Kaufman, possibly one of the most prolific Western composers of the last 20 years. But for all I know, I could be blowing hot air, most of what I listen to is just older stuff, so. And with that odd sound, this was my Masters of VGM. But with my choices, I didn't let the whole title be as restrictive as it sounds. So now this whole thing, the Masters of VGM, is a multi-podcast event. And you can find all the VGM podcasts that are doing this on the website mastersofvgm.com, where all the episodes for this event are going to be, centrally located, as well as links to all their respective websites. And a big shout out to Bedroth and Steam 3D for getting this all together and organized. Now, as for my show, you can find it on all your favorite podcatchers, Spotify, Apple, Google, even Audible, crazy, and then as well as on social media such as Instagram and Twitter, and then you can find me, your host, Rage Cage, on those same social medias, as well as Facebook and SoundCloud, where I post my own original music occasionally. So next week will be honorable mentions, where I'll be sharing the music of, some composers that I considered for this list. Nothing as intensive as this one, just mostly like, announcing who they are, playing a track, moving on to the next one. So it'll be considerably easier compared to what this episode has been, which was a multi-day endeavor, with the added bonus of clearing out the closet space to create this new workspace, surrounded by a couple of ponchos, a beat-up old Persian rug, and a blanket crocheted by my grandmother. And I gotta figure out how to work things to make it sound less verby. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. Hopefully I introduced you to some new music, possibly some new composers you've never heard of and want to go check out. That'll be a cool thing. Yeah, I've been Rage Cage, your host, and see you next week. Or, I don't see you. How can I see you unless I'm seeing you through the sound waves?